A brief life history of Sri Ramana. Among all the globes, this earth is the only one for attaining liberation. And among all the countries on earth, Bharatam, India, is the best. Among all the holy places, kshetras in Bharatam, where various divine powers are manifest and functioning, Arunachalam is the foremost. Tiruvarur, Chidambaram, and Kasi are the holy places which bestow liberation upon those who are born in, who see, or who die in them respectively. But Arunachalam bestows liberation upon anyone on earth who merely thinks of it. Sri Arunachala Vemba, verses 1 and 2. Arunachalam is the heart of the earth. It is the primal form, Adi Lingam, of Lord Siva. It is the hill of the fire of knowledge, Jinanagni. Since it appeared as the hill of the light of knowledge between Brahma and Vishnu when they were deluded, destroying their egos and teaching them the true knowledge, Arunachalam was the Jnana Guru even to them, because it has held the seat Pitam of Jnana Guru for all the three worlds from the very beginning of time. Arunachalam has even now manifested as the form of the Sadguru, Bhagavan Sri Ramana, to instruct the whole world. Further, to hint to us indirectly that it is none other than the primal guru Dakshinamurti, who appeared as a young lad of 16. It came to Arunachalam and acceded to the seat of guru at the age of 16. It lived there for more than half a century, saving countless souls from the disease of birth and death. Since this great one, Mahapurusha, who is generally called by the holy name Sri Ramana Bhagavan, addresses the hill as Arunachala Ramana in the last verse of his hymn, Sri Arunachala Aksharamanamalayi, since in Atmavidya Kirtanam, verse 5, the original words or Sri Bhagavan in this verse are Animalai yen anma, which mean either self, which is called Animalai, or Animalai, myself. He says that self, which he experienced to be the supreme thing, Paravastu, is that which is called Animalai, Arunachalam, and since he replied to a devotee who asked about his real nature, this Arunachala Ramanan is the supreme self who blissfully shines as consciousness in the core of the heart lotus of all souls beginning with Hari, Lord Vishnu. The secret comes to light that Arunachalam itself is Ramana, Ramana himself is Arunachalam, and that the holy name truly befitting him is Sri Arunachala Ramanan. Hence, Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Arunachala Ramanaya. Footnote. The original words or Sri Bhagavan in this verse are Animalai yen anma, which mean either self, which is called Animalai, or Animalai, myself. The supreme thing gradually matures the souls towards the achievement of self-knowledge, Atmajnana, through so many births, and finally, when they are fully mature, incarnates itself as the Sadguru, pulls all such ripe souls to its divine feet from wheresoever on earth they were born, and bestows upon them its non-dual union. Such is the divine plan. Many are the special signs that are evident when the Sadguru incarnates, and those who are wise can understand from such signs that he alone is the Sadguru. The four Sanakadi rishis, who were highly mature souls, were reluctant to take any of the three manifestations of God, Brahma, Vishnu, or Siva, as guru, and wandered away in search of the Sadguru until they eventually became old. At that time, Sri Dakshinamurti, who in spite of having no guru was immersed in self, was sitting in the form of a 16-year-old boy under the banyan tree, facing southwards with Chin Mudra, the hand pose indicating knowledge, Chit. When they came into his gracious presence, they felt attracted, and through the maturity of their understanding they recognized, this is the real Sadguru. They sat at his feet, and through his silent teaching, realize self. Just as Sri Dakshinamurti, the original guru who himself, Atman, was guru to himself, became the guru for all the worlds, Sri Ramana Bhagavan has also become the guru for all the worlds without himself having a guru. It is a well-known fact that all the great ones who came on earth, including Sri Rama and Sri Krishna, had to have a guru in human form. Although the Buddha and a few very mature souls like him were able to obtain knowledge of the reality without a Jnana guru, even he attained the goal only after having gone to many fake and worthless gurus and having been disappointed many times, and after having undertaken strenuous efforts alone for many years. But Bhagavan Sri Ramana, prompted only by the fear of death, which overpowered him of its own accord, attained self-realization within a short moment as a 16-year-old schoolboy, without a guru either in human form or in any of the forms of God, and without having done any sadhana or tapas. The knowledge of the reality which dawned in him on that day ever remained with him as his natural state sahajasthiti, nothing being added to or removed from it. Even though Bhagavan Sri Ramana, who thus shines as the foremost Jnana Guru for the whole world, is really none other than the nameless and formless Supreme Thing, in accordance with our ignorant outlook of taking the course of the life of his body as his holy life history, let us see a sketch of his biography. Bhagavan Sri Ramana was born on the 30th of December, 1879, as the second son of Sundaram Iyer and Ajha in Tiruchuzhi, a Siva Kshetra 30 miles southeast of Madurai, in Tamil Nadu, a province of South India. His parents named him Venkataraman. His elder brother was Nagaswami, his younger brother was Nagasundaram, and Alarmelu was their sister. Venkataraman completed his primary education in Tiruchuzhi and Dindukkal. When he was 12 years old, owing to the fact that his father passed away, he and his elder brother moved to their paternal uncle's house in Madurai to continue their higher education in the American Mission High School. Though he had a clear and sharp intellect and a keen power of memory, it seems that he did not use them in his schoolwork. He was merely an average student in his class, but having a healthy body. He was foremost in wrestling, football, staff fighting, swimming, and so on. Before he stood for the 10th standard examination, the great divine change in his life took place all of a sudden. To bring about this great change, he did not read any scripture, nor did he have a guru, though by chance he had read the Periyaparanam, the lives of the 63 Tamil saints. Even that was not the actual cause for his self-realization. Then what could have been the cause? Footnote. When after hearing of his father's death, Venkataraman came from Dindukkal to Tiruchuzhi to see him, he wondered, when father is lying here, why do they say that he is gone? Some elders then told him, if this were your father, would he not receive you with love? So you see, he has gone. This information might have roused in him the idea that this body was not his father, the person. We may assume that this was a seed which afterwards blossomed in him at the age of 16. It was on a day in mid-July, in the year 1896. Venkataraman was sitting alone in a small room upstairs. Though there was no sickness in the body, a great fear arose in him that he was going to die. It happened not merely as an imaginary or superficial fear, but as an actual experience of death. He was not perturbed by this. He did not even inform anyone of it. He boldly welcomed the forthcoming death and ventured to scrutinize it and find the result of this scrutiny for himself. Yes, death has come. Let it come. What is death? To whom does it come? To me. Who am I? What is it that is dying? Yes, it is this body that is dying. Let it die. Deciding thus, he laid down, stretching his arms and legs. Closing his lips tightly and remaining without speech or breath, he turned his attention very keenly towards himself. Death was experienced. What did he come to know at that time? All right, this body is dead. Now it will be taken to the cremation ground and burnt. It will become ashes. But with the destruction of this body, am I also destroyed? Am I really this body? Untouched by this death which has turned the body into a corpse, here and now I am still existing and shining. Then I am not this perishable body. I and it are different. I am the indestructible I, self. Of all things, I, unbound by the body, alone am real. The body and world are meant only for destruction, but I, who transcend the body, am the eternal, supreme thing. This true knowledge of self, Atma Jnana, shone forth clear in him as a direct experience, and the fear of death which had risen in him vanished once and forever. From that time onwards, this state of self-experience continued to shine permanently in him as his natural state, unbound by time and space and without increase or decrease. Although afterwards many people believe that in his early years in Tiruvannamalai, Sri Bhagavan was performing deliberate austerities, tapas, or doing some spiritual practices, sadhanas. On a number of occasions in his later years, he clearly refuted such ideas. He once said, "The sun that shone in Madurai was found to remain the same in Tiruvannamalai. Nothing was newly added to or removed from my experience." Footnote. On another occasion, on 4th October 1946, when a devotee named Professor D.S. Sarma asked him whether there was ever any period of purgation or sadhana in his life, Sri Bhagavan replied, "I know no such period. I never performed any pranayama or japa. I knew no mantras. I had no idea of meditation or contemplation. Even when I came to hear of such things later, I was never attracted by them. Even now, my mind refuses to pay any attention to them." Sadhana implies an object to be gained and the means of gaining it. What is there to be gained which we do not already possess? In meditation, concentration, and contemplation, what we have to do is only not to think of anything, but to be still. Then we shall be in our natural state. This natural state is given many names: moksha, jnana, atma, etc. There was a time when I used to remain with my eyes closed. That does not mean that I was practicing any sadhana then. Even now I sometimes remain with my eyes closed. If people choose to say that I am doing some sadhana at the moment, let them say so. It makes no difference to me. People seem to think that by practicing some elaborate sadhana, the self would someday descend upon them as something very big and with tremendous glory, and they would then have what is called sakshatkaram, realization. The self is sakshat, direct, all right, but there is no karam, doing, or kritam, done, about it. The word karam implies one's doing something, but the self is realized not by one's doing something, but by one's refraining from doing anything, by remaining still and being simply what one really is. Thus, without an outer guru and without any inner, age-long strenuous sadhana, Venkataraman attained on the very first attempt the natural state of self-knowledge, sahaja atma jnana sthiti, which is declared by the Upanishads and all other Vedantic scriptures to be the unsurpassed state and the supreme benefit of human birth. This experience, self-attainment, brought forth indescribable vast changes even in the outward life of Venkataraman. Since it was now his clear experience that he was the eternal, perfect reality, which is other than the body, from that day onwards his life was transformed into a new and wondrous one which could in no way be compatible with that of ordinary people, a life which they could not even understand, let alone imitate, no matter how hard they might try. After this experience, the slight interest in school lessons which there was before left him completely. He still went to school, but simply to please others. Even the taste for games, which once appealed to him so much, disappeared entirely from his mind. The love and attachments towards friends and relatives also faded away, as did the interest in food and mundane activities. He who in the past had always fought for the right now became indifferent and no longer reacted in any way towards any kind of wrong or right. His previous nature of responding with severe blows if anyone scolded him changed, and now a sweet smile of forgiveness and indifference would appear on his face as a reply. What a wonderful change! The self-experience transformed him into a perfect sadhu. Love, nonviolence, patience, compassion, forgiveness, control over the senses, humility, fearlessness, all such divine qualities settled in him naturally and in full, not due to practice, but as a result of self-experience. To him a life of worldly activities was now meaningless, dry and unreal, just as a dream is useless, empty and unreal to him who has woken up from it. He was often seen to be sitting in solitude, absorbed and reveling in self. In truth, the former Venkataraman was no longer there, and Bhagavan Ramana alone did shine. An incident which gave a hint of this self-absorption even at the age of 12 took place in Dindukal when Venkataraman was studying there. But those who were around him at that time did not recognize its importance and preciousness. One day, while his relatives had gone out, Venkataraman lay on his bed after locking the house from inside. On their return, even though they knocked at the door and called him loudly, the door was not opened. After finding another way to enter the house, they again tried to wake him from his sound sleep by shaking, rolling, and beating his body heavily. But all in vain, Venkataraman would not wake up. After some time, however, he woke up of his own accord. The people assembled there wondered at this, exclaiming, "A sleep of Kumbhakarnan." Footnote: Kumbhakarnan was a Rakshasa in the Ramayana, renowned for his long sleep lasting 6 months. But this state was neither a dull sleep nor a swoon. It was in fact the state of samadhi. Once, years after, Sri Bhagavan remarked about this state. The result of what was done and left had now resumed again, on account of which the attention was always in the source, self. Since Venkataraman had lost all interest in his studies, his school teacher started to punish him. Even Nagaswami, his elder brother, grew angry noticing the vast change in him. Whenever he saw him sitting in self-absorption, he would jeer at him. What a great sage, a Yogiswara! But Venkataraman, who had the clear knowledge of the reality and was thereby unshakable, did not mind all this. One day, his teacher gave him an imposition to write 3 times an English grammar lesson which he had failed to learn. Next day, it was a Saturday, the 29th of August 1896. Sri Ramana had written the imposition twice when he felt a dejection towards this useless work. Throwing away the pencil and notebook, he sat up and closed his eyes in self-absorption, nishtha. Nagaswami, who was sitting nearby, was saddened at seeing this. With the intention of correcting his brother, he exclaimed with pity and anger, "Yes, why all these for one like this?" To him who would usually have been indifferent towards such a remark, the words seemed meaningful on that particular occasion. He thought, "Yes, what he says is true. What do I now have to do here and with these things? Nothing." He immediately resolved to leave the house. All at once the remembrance of Arunachalam flashed spontaneously through his mind. He decided, "Yes, Arunachalam is the only place for me to go to." As he got up and started to walk out, Nagaswami asked him to get 5 rupees from their aunt and pay his college fees. Sri Ramana consulted an old map of Madras Presidency, which unfortunately did not show the branch line from Viluppuram to Katpadi, midway along which lies Tiruvannamalai, Arunachalam. He therefore thought that Tindivanam was the closest railway station to Tiruvannamalai. Out of the 5 rupees given by his aunt, he took with him only 3. He hastily wrote a note and, leaving it along with the remaining 2 rupees, he left the house. The note said, "In search of my father, I yell by his order, am going, leaving this place. This is undertaking only a good cause. Therefore, no one need grieve over this action. To see this, there is no need even to spend money. Your fees have not yet been paid. Herewith are 2 rupees. Thus, note, the usage of L might symbolize a path, a journey, or an idea, depending on the context. Instead of a signature, only a straight line was drawn at the bottom of the note. The formation of the sentences here holds a deep meaning. The word starting the first sentence, changed into this in the next, and even this had vanished by the end of the note, which is concluded by the absence of a signature. Yes, the human body, which was considered to be I so long as the sense of I, ahankaram, and the sense of mine, mamakaram, lasted, became to him this, an insentient and alien object, as soon as the I and mine had been surrendered to God. When the union, i.e. oneness, with the Supreme finally takes place, what else can remain as a separate entity? It is this state of oneness which is shown by the absence of a signature. How clear! The state of perfect jnana even at the age of 16. Footnote: Jnana is the state of true knowledge in which nothing exists but self. The insertion just after the word I of the phrase, "in search of my father," clearly points out that so long as the sense of I is retained, one should depend upon God as one's sole refuge. No would be non-dualist. Advaitin can rightly deny God and a dual love towards him so long as his sense of individuality survives. Sri Ramana went to Madurai railway station. In those days, the 3 rupees which he had taken thinking it to be the approximate train fare was exactly the right amount to go from Madurai to Tiruvannamalai. But what was to happen? Not knowing that he could go all the way to Tiruvannamalai by train, he took a ticket for Tindivanam instead and got into the train. During the journey, a Maulvi, an Islamic priest, sat near him and talked to him of his own accord, informing him that he should change train at Viluppuram to go to Tiruvannamalai. Now, with the money still remaining, Sri Ramana was able to reach only as far as Mambajapattu. There, he got down and walked 10 miles in the direction of Arunachalam. He reached Arayani Nallur Temple, which is built on a rock but was not allowed to stay there for the night. He then walked down with the priest to Virataswara Temple in Kijur. After the puja was over, Sri Ramana, who was tired and hungry, asked the priest for some prasadam, the food consecrated by being offered to God. The Brahmin priest refused, but the temple piper, whose heart was moved on seeing this, pleaded with him, "Sir, kindly give him at least my portion of the prasadam." On account of the request of that virtuous man, who illustrated by his action the description of a perfect Brahmin, the Brahmin is he, the virtuous, who is compassionate to every creature on earth. A little food was placed in the hands of Sri Ramana. He spent that night nearby, and the next morning, which was the day of Sri Krishna Jayanti, he happened to come to the house of one Muthukrishna Bhagavatar. After he had taken some food in the Bhagavatar's house, the 2 gold earrings which he was wearing came suddenly to his memory. Removing them from his ears, he handed them over to the Bhagavatar and was given 4 rupees. With this money, he bought a train ticket to Tiruvannamalai. Early next morning, Tuesday, the 1st September, 1896, he arrived at Sri Arunachalam, which had occupied his heart from his childhood, and which had now robbed off his mind and drawn him near. He went directly to the inner shrine of Sri Arunachalaswar temple and surrendered himself completely. Footnote: in later years, Sri Bhagavan revealed that when he entered the temple, the gate of the inner shrine was open and no one was present. He also added that at that time he embraced the lingam. The intense heat which was till then in his body at once subsided. The journey of the soul, the river, had ended once for all at its destination, the ocean of bliss. Sri Ramana came out of the inner shrine, perfectly contented with the treasure, the fullness of jnana. Since all freedom of mind, speech, and body had been surrendered to Sri Arunachalaswara, Sri Ramana became effortlessly silent. When someone approached him and asked, "Swami, will you have your head shaved?" Logically, Sri Ramana nodded affirmatively, being convinced that it was the will of Sri Arunachalaswara. His long, fine, and wavy hair, which was like a beautiful black creeper, was in no time removed, and a clean-shaven head remained. He threw away the sacred thread, the sign of his caste. From his dhoti, he tore off a piece for a loincloth and discarded the rest, together with the remaining money which was tied in a corner. The packet of sweets given to him by the loving lady in the Bhagavatar's house was thrown into Ayankulam tank. He did not even take a bath after being shaved, but on his way back to the temple there was an unexpected downpour. Perhaps this shower from the sky was the ceremonial bath of Abritha Snanam given by Sri Arunachalaswara to his divine son on the completion of the greatest tapas. Sri Ramana reached the temple and sat absorbed in the samadhi in the 1,000-pillared mantapam. But can the foolish world understand the greatness of sages? Some wicked people and mischievous children started to trouble him by mocking, "Mad boy, dumb fellow," and by throwing stones and pieces of broken pots. Yes, it is the usual treatment available to all great ones who came on earth, is it not? Did not Buddha, Mahavira, Jesus, and others receive such treatment from the people? This was therefore nothing new. Though indifferent to them, Sri Ramana withdrew himself from their sight and went down into a nearby cellar, the Patala Lingam, where no one dared to go even in daytime as it was so dark. There he sat immersed in samadhi, concealing himself behind this lingam. Days rolled on, yet he did not stir from samadhi. Since he was established in oneness with the reality, the state transcending the knowledge of the world and body, how could there be hunger and thirst to either the body or the mind? For him who was drowned in the bliss of jnana, the state of bodilessness, how could there be a feeling of pain or any misery caused by the outside world? On the damp ground where Sri Ramana was sitting were many ants, termites, mosquitoes, flies, and centipedes. They began to eat away the lower side of his thighs and blood started oozing out. The oozing blood clotted, pus formed, and both mixed with the mud, thus sealing the body to the ground. Yet he was not at all disturbed by this, for he knew nothing of it. Do we not read stories in the Puranas about rishis such as Valmiki, who were immersed in tapas while ant hills grew over their bodies and birds made nests and lived on their heads? By living thus before our eyes, Sri Ramana has proved in modern times that these stories were not false. People came to know of this many days later through Sri Seshadri Swami, a great soul who lived in the Tiruvannamalai at that time. Though Sri Seshadri Swami appeared to be a madman, he was in fact a saint, and some good folk understood his exalted state and revered him. He was able to recognize the genuine greatness of the jnana of Sri Ramana. The legs of the snake are known only to a snake, says the proverb. One day, having just come out of the Patala Lingam, Sri Seshadri Swami informed Venkatachala Mudaliar, a devotee of his, "There is a small Swami inside, go and see." So saying, he walked away. Though it was daytime, Venkatachala Mudaliar took a lantern, and along with some others entered the Patala Lingam. They called Sri Ramana loudly, but as there was no response, they lifted his body. Alas, because the body was sealed to the earth and was now forcibly separated, blood rushed out through the fresh wounds. On seeing this, they were awestruck. Carefully and gently they brought the body out and kept it in the Gopuram Subramania temple. Even then Sri Ramana did not regain body consciousness, but remained in samadhi. Some devotees, prompted by their conviction that Sri Ramana was God in human form, engaged themselves with great fervor in his service. Once in many days, whenever he opened his eyes, they would feed him with a little milk, crushed bananas, or liquid food. The outward activities of Sri Ramana, such as taking food and answering the calls of nature, went on just like those of a sleeping child. On those occasions when his eyes did not open for some days, they would themselves open his mouth and try to pour in at least a small quantity of liquid mixture. Sri Ramana stayed in Arunachala temple for a few months, but he did not like people often crowding around to see him. Preferring to be alone, he moved to Gurumurtham temple, which was fairly far away from the town, and for about 1.5 years he remained there in samadhi. In the meanwhile, the note which he left in Madurai had been found, whereupon his elder brother Nagaswami, his mother, uncle, and other relatives and friends had begun to search for him in many places, but had so far been disappointed. At last they came to know of his whereabouts through one Annamalai Tambiran, who had been serving Sri Ramana in Gurumurtham temple. Since Subayar, the uncle with whom Sri Ramana had been living in Madurai, had recently passed away, Nilayapayar, Subayar's younger brother, started at once for Tiruvannamalai. He came to Gurumurtham, but no matter how much he entreated him to come back to Madurai, Sri Ramana remained silent. Having failed in his attempt, Nilayapayar returned home empty-handed. Seeing his fruitless effort, Ajahamal herself came to Tiruvannamalai, accompanied by Nagaswami as soon as she could. At that time, December 1898, Sri Ramana was staying on Pavajakundru, an eastern spur of Arunachalam. When his mother saw the pitiable condition of his body, she burst into tears and prayed, "My dear child, come back to Madurai. How can I possibly bear to live comfortably in a home when you are lying here on stones and thorns? Don't be stubborn, my boy. Please don't show such dispassion. Your mother's heart is torn apart. Come home, my child." She wept bitterly and implored him in ever so many ways. Nagaswami also repeatedly pleaded and repented. "Alas, I didn't really mean it when I spoke in that way. I never imagined that it would bring about such a calamity." Though they stayed and appealed for 10 days, not even the slightest sign either of consent or of refusal appeared on the face of Sri Ramana. He remained as silent as ever. Some of the onlookers, being unable to bear with this pitiful sight, gave Sri Ramana a piece of paper and a pencil, and begged him, "Swami, your mother is sobbing and her heart is bleeding. Graciously give your reply, at least in writing. You need not break your silence." He wrote, "According to the prarabdha, destiny of each one, he, its ordainer, being in every place, in every soul, will make it play its role. That which is not to happen will never happen, however hard one tries. That which is to happen will not stop, in spite of any amount of obstruction. This is certain. Hence, to remain silent is the best." What a steadfastness born of self-knowledge! Inanna. What a steadfastness free not only of affection, but also of aversion. How great an unshakability of mind, when even a mountain would have moved. The state of one who abides unshaken in Siyif has more grandeur than the mightiest mountain. Tiruchuzhi, verse 124. What could the devotees and his mother do? She returned home afflicted. Do not many among us wonder why Sri Ramana behaved in such a fashion towards his mother, since it is now a well-known fact that not only all human beings, but also birds and beasts enjoyed his gracious benevolence? So long as Ajahamal was filled with motherly affection and showed the ignorance of attachment, you are my child, I am your mother, your protector. Come home with me. Was it not the task of Sri Ramana to remove that ignorant outlook and thus save her? Therefore, by the sword of such silence, he was cutting at the knot of attachment in her. This was not to abandon her, but to take her finally as his own. It was only the first step to make her renounce everything and to come to the feet of her son, the embodiment of Jnana. Moreover, on another occasion, in 1914, when his mother came to see him and happened to suffer from a high fever, Sri Ramana composed 4 verses, whereupon the fever subsided. She then returned to Madurai. Soon after his mother's first visit, Sri Ramana moved to Virupakshi cave. It was in those years that the swarm of disciples gathered around him to drink the nectar of instructions flowing from the fully bloomed lotus of Jnana. Yes, when the tree yields ripe fruit, does one need to call the fruit bats? Sri Bhagavan's mere gracious and silent presence shone as the sun of self and cleared the doubts of the devotees and blossomed their hearts. The young Sri Ramana was only about 20 years old at that time, but the disciples who came to him with the hunger for jnana were much older and very learned. How wonderful! Young was the guru who shone under the banyan tree, and aged were the disciples who came. Silence was the speech given by the beloved guru, and the doubts in the disciples' minds were cleared. Footnote: a Sanskrit verse on Sri Dakshinamurti, which was translated into Tamil by Sri Bhagavan. The same wonder happened in the presence of Sri Ramana. Though the world was able to receive some instructions from him in writing, and later orally also, there were many aspirants whose doubts have all been cleared, and who have been saved by his mere silent presence. Silence is the unequaled eloquence, the state of grace that rises within. Sri Bhagavan. Silence is the unfailing teaching, Upadesa. Writing or speech cannot stand equal to it. Sometimes they may even be an obstruction. Thus says Sri Raman. In 1900, Gambhiram Seshayar, who was making efforts on the path of Raja Yoga, often visited Sri Ramana and, whenever he opened his eyes from samadhi, would ask him questions regarding spiritual practices. Gambhiram Seshayar would give Sri Ramana pieces of paper and a pen to write his replies. The replies written by Sri Ramana on such occasions were afterwards edited by Sri Natananandar and published by the Asramam in the original Tamil under the title Vihara Sangraham. The work Nan Yar, Who Am I? Was received from Sri Ramana in a similar manner by Sri Sivaprakasam Pillai. Though small in size, this work has now become famous on account of its power to save humanity by showing the right way to the supreme benefit. The answers given by Sri Ramana to the questions of Sri Natananandar have become the work Upadesa Manjari. In 1907, a great Sanskrit poet, Kavya Kanta Ganapati Sastri, came to visit Sri Ramana. He was an ascetic, tapasvi, who had performed many millions of mantra japas. But he was still not able to understand what is real tapas. Hence he approached Sri Ramana and said, I have learnt all the Vedas, performed millions of mantra japas, undergone fasting and other austerities, yet I still do not know what tapas really is. Please instruct me. Sri Bhagavan replied, if watched wherefrom the eye starts, there the mind merges, that is a tapas. However, when Ganapati Sastri further asked, is it possible to attain the same state through japa? Sri Ramana replied, when a mantra is pronounced, if watched wherefrom the sound starts, there the mind will merge, that is tapas. After receiving these instructions, Sri Kavya Kanta Ganapati Sastri declared, he is no ordinary soul. He is the perfect Jnana Guru. Since he ever remains in natural self-abidance, he is verily Bhagavan Maharshi, and praised him in verses as Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi. It is only from that day that he was known by this name. Bhagavan Sri Ramana is a unique and divine poet. His poetic genius in Tamil, his mother tongue, breathes a fresh life into the sacred style of the poets of yore. Besides being compact and terse, the flow of his sublime Tamil poetry is noble and pregnant with new and rich import. To say the truth, Bhagavan Ramana is a Vedic rishi who has given us Tamil Upanishads. Further, not only was he a poet in Tamil, but also in Sanskrit, Malayalam, and Telugu. He was the first to have been able to compose Telugu verses in Venba, an extremely difficult Tamil meter. Mother Tamil has been adorned by him with ever so many gems of jnana in the form of verses of unsurpassed worth. However, Bhagavan Ramana was not merely a writer. He never had an intention, sankalpa, to write anything. Indeed, intentionlessness, nisankalpa, was the state in which he lived from the day he set foot in Arunachalam. How then was the world blessed with at least some words of instruction from Bhagavan Sri Ramana? Do we not admit the existence of God, the supreme power who creates, sustains, and destroys the world? It is that same power who, having the prayers, doubts, and questions of the devotees as its motive, and using Sri Bhagavan's mind, speech, and body as its instruments, gave through him spiritual instructions for the salvation of humanity. Sometimes sweet and precious Tamil verses would flow from him in answer to the questions of devotees. The instructions of Sri Bhagavan, which we now have, are those which escape from his lips in this manner. All of them, when collected and edited, make up his complete works. Among them, 5 stotras, hymns, and 3 sastras, scriptures, are the important works. The stotras are Sri Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, the 5 hymns to Sri Arunachala, and the sastras are Upadesa Undiyar, Uladu Narpadu, and Guru Vachaka Kovai. In response to Sri Muruganar, the foremost devotee of Sri Bhagavan, and a great Tamil poet, Sri Bhagavan not only composed in Tamil Upadesa Undiyar, but he also compiled Uladu Narpadu, which is an unequaled Upanishad, by revising some of his previous verses and by composing many new ones. Guru Vachaka Kovai is the treasure house of Sri Ramana's instructions, collected and preserved in Tamil verses by Sri Muruganar, all of them being the day-to-day sayings of Sri Bhagavan from the very early days. These 3 important works of Sri Bhagavan, which have come into existence having Sri Muruganar as the sole motive, form Sri Ramana Prasthanatrayam, the 3 works of divine authority on moksha by Sri Ramana. Arunachalam, the sacred hill, is the primal and foremost form of Lord Siva. Indeed, it is Siva himself. Sages not only show us the path, but also set an example by treading upon it themselves. In this manner, Bhagavan Sri Ramana himself often did Arunachala Pradakshinam in the company of his devotees. Footnote: Pradakshinam means walking barefoot around a sacred object having it to one's right-hand side. It is described in the Puranas how this Giri Pradakshinam was the sole means by which Unnamalai Ambikai, the consort of Sri Arunachalaswara, became Ardhanariswara when her form combined with that of the Lord. Moreover, when even Sri Arunachaleswara, the divinity in the temple, circumambulates the hill twice every year, how can we conceive of the greatness of Arunachala Pradakshinam? It was on the occasion of one such Pradakshinam, in the days when he was living in Virupakshi cave, that Sri Bhagavan composed the renowned Sri Arunachala Aksharamanammalai, the first of the 5 hymns. Many thousands of his devotees now recite this hymn as a means to remember Arunachalam, which bestows liberation when merely thought of. To have been the birthplace of the Guru for the whole universe, Loka Mahaguru, is the great fortune of Tamil Nadu. Far greater still was the fortune of Ajahamal to have given birth to such a great one, and immense was her merit to have sacrificed her son for the benefit of the whole world. How could such a sacrifice have gone in vain? It ultimately crowned her with the attainment of liberation. As time went on, Ajahamal became a prey to the divine attraction of Sri Bhagavan, who lived as an Atitasrami, one for whom there is neither attraction nor aversion towards relatives. Footnote: Atitasrami is one beyond the 4 asramas, the stages of life in Hindu society. Gradually, Sri Bhagavan's grace ripened her and made her renounce her native place, home, and all family and worldly attachments, till at last in 1916 she returned and took refuge at his feet, thus becoming one among the disciples who had already surrendered to him. Nagasundaram, Sri Bhagavan's younger brother, followed her and also took refuge at his feet. He later became a sannyasin, taking the names Sri Niranjanananda Swami, and it was he who was the sole cause for the formation and the development of the present Sri Ramanasramam. Some of the devotees who were with Sri Bhagavan at that time feared that he might go away if relatives also crowded around him. Furthermore, some objections were raised against Ajahamal staying with Sri Bhagavan. Little did they know, however, that relatives could now only float on the surface like the water lily, and could never be like salt, which dissolves in and contaminates the water. Thus Sri Bhagavan exemplified to the modern world the strength of the natural state of self, by which one can live with mental detachment in all circumstances. Later on, the devotees constructed a small and beautiful asramam in a secluded spot still higher up the hill, and since the major part of the construction was done by the single-handed effort and service of Kandaswami, a devotee, it was named after him as Skandasramam. Sri Bhagavan lived there till the end of 1922. In May of that year, Ajahamal fell ill. During her last hours, Sri Bhagavan sat by her side placing his hands, those hands of divine power, the right one on her heart and the left one on her head. At that time, a long and severe inner fight took place between her past tendencies towards action, karma, vasanas, which would have given her many future births, and the power of grace flowing through the hands of Sri Bhagavan. At last, all those past tendencies were crushed and destroyed, and her soul quietly returned and merged into the real state, Brahman. Her body left her on the night of 19th May, 1922, whereupon Sri Bhagavan indicated that she had attained liberation. Her sacred body was buried on the banks of Palatirtham, a tank at the foot of the southern slope of Arunachalam. The Sivalingam which was installed over her tomb is now known as Sri Matrubhutaswara. It was appropriate that in later years the filial love of Sri Niranjanananda Swami built a temple for his mother, who had built a body temple for Sri Bhagavan to live in on earth. After Ajahamal's passing away, Sri Bhagavan would often take a walk from Skandasramam to her tomb, which in early days was sheltered by a small thatched hut. Then, in December 1922, according to the divine ordinance of Sri Arunachalam, he came down and settled there permanently. Many devotees came to live in the presence of Sri Bhagavan, and in due course there grew around him many large and handsome buildings, which now constitute the present Sri Ramanasramam. Perfect equality was the principle lived by Sri Bhagavan in Sri Ramanasramam. Till the end, he wore only a loincloth, which is less than the dress needed by even the poorest among our countrymen. The same was the case with his food, for which he always sat among the devotees, and which was the same as that served to all. In fact, it was rather less than what was served to others. Whatever eatables devotees offered him would be equally distributed, then and there, to everyone in his presence. Not only human beings, but even cows, dogs, monkeys, squirrels, crows, and peacocks enjoyed perfect freedom and full rights in the ashramam. Cow Lakshmi, for example, lived there as a pet daughter and attained liberation in her last hour by the divine touch of Sri Bhagavan. The doors of the small hall where Sri Bhagavan lived were open day and night, and to all. In a life such as his, which was shining as a vast open space of mere consciousness, where was the necessity to hide himself and how to do so? Even in the middle of the night, devotees were free to go and see him in the hall. Defects alone need to hide, a pure heart need not, is a wise saying of Saint Oviyar. To have the darshan of Sri Bhagavan was a great fortune which was not bound by any condition, and which was open to all people and at all times. When he gave a warm welcome even to the thieves who came at night, saying, "You may come in and take whatever you want," what better proof is needed of Sri Bhagavan's sense of equality? It was at 11:30 in the middle of the night of the 26th of June 1924. Though at that time Sri Ramanasramam consisted of only a few thatched sheds, some thieves came thinking it to be a rich mutt. They tried to break in through the windows by smashing them and threatened to destroy everything. The noise woke up the devotees who were sleeping in the shed where Sri Bhagavan was lying. Sri Bhagavan invited the thieves to come in through the proper doorway and asked the devotees to give them a hurricane lamp so that they could look for whatever they wanted. Yet they shouted angrily, "Where are you keeping your money? We are sadhus who live by begging. We have no money. From what you can find here, you may take away anything you want. We will come outside." So saying, Sri Bhagavan came and sat outside, followed by the devotees. As they came out of the shed, the thieves beat them with sticks, and one blow even fell on the thigh of Sri Bhagavan. "If you are still not satisfied, beat the other thigh as well," said Sri Bhagavan, feeling sorry for them. Was this to be the limit of his kindness towards the thieves? No. He also prevented a young devotee who, unable to bear the sight of Sri Bhagavan being beaten, jumped up with an iron bar in retaliation. Sri Bhagavan advised him, "Let them do their dharma, i.e. roll. We are sadhus, we should not give up our dharma. In future, the world will blame only us if any wrong happens. When our teeth bite our tongue, do we break them and throw them away? Though others do wrong to one, it is best not to return the same in wrath." Tiruchuzhi, verse 157. Some days later, the police caught the thieves and brought them before Sri Bhagavan, and an officer asked him to identify the one who had beaten him on that night. Sri Bhagavan at once replied with a smile, "Find out whom I beat in a previous birth, for it is he who has beaten me now." He never denounced the criminal. Conquer the foe by your worthy patience, and forever forget the wrong done to you on account of ignorance. Tiruchuzhi, verse 157. The right way of punishing the wrongdoer is to do good to him and to forget his wrong. Tiruchuzhi, verse 314. As time went by, people throughout the world came to know that Sri Bhagavan was the living embodiment of all that is taught in the Bible, Tiruchuzhi, Gita, and Upanishads, and were attracted to his feet. Forgetting the national differences such as Indian and foreigner, and the religious differences such as Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, Jain, and Sikh, from far and abroad they flocked to the feet of Sri Bhagavan and adored him, for such was their conviction that he was indeed the guru of their own religion. Many among them achieved true knowledge, some by merely seeing Sri Bhagavan, some by living in his divine presence, some by dedicating themselves wholeheartedly to his service, and some by following his teachings. The former president of India, Mr. Rajendra Prasad, once went to the ashramam of Mahatma Gandhi and said, "Bapuji, I have come to you for peace." The abode of peace was known well to Gandhiji, and hence he advised, "If you want peace, go to Sri Ramana Maharshi and remain for a few days in the presence of Sri Ramana Maharshi without talking or asking any question." Mr. Rajendra Prasad accordingly arrived at Sri Ramana Maharshi on the 14th of August 1938, though those who accompanied him spent their time in asking Sri Bhagavan questions regarding spiritual matters and in visiting all the places on the hill where he had lived. Mr. Rajendra Prasad did not move away from the presence of Sri Bhagavan. Besides, according to the advice of Gandhiji, he spent the whole of that week without raising any question or doubt. At the time of his taking leave of Sri Bhagavan, he approached him and humbly inquired, "O Bhagavan, it was Gandhiji himself who sent me here. Is there any message that I may take to him?" Sri Bhagavan graciously answered, "The same power which works here is working there also. Where is the need for words when heart speaks to heart?" These are unique words of wisdom revealing the secret that it is the one supreme thing alone that governs the whole universe through all the innumerable souls. Just like Rajendra Prasad and Gandhiji, all men of high position and power, all great poets, scholars, politicians, philosophers, and religious leaders who lived in our country during his time praised the glory of his jnana. It is the essential teachings of such a great one, the guru for the whole universe, that form the two parts of the path of Sri Ramana. Maharshi Ramana taught two paths as the main spiritual practices, sadhanas, for the salvation of humanity. They are 1. The path of self-inquiry, that is, knowing oneself, one's real nature, by inquiring, "Who am I?" And 2. The path of self-surrender, that is, surrendering oneself, the ego, completely to God. The former is the path of knowledge, jnana marga, and the latter is the path of devotion, bhakti marga. Is not the aim of all the various researches going on in the world to know about the world and God, the second and third persons, rather than to know oneself, the first person? Man, who makes so much effort to know about the world and God, still does not know who he himself really is. How? We say, "I am a man." This is not a correct knowledge of ourself, but only ignorance. We feel that we are a man because we mistake a human body, our possession, for we, the possessor. Separating ourselves from our possession, the body, by means of the inquiry, "Who am I?" and acquiring the right knowledge about the possessor, I, is the best research of all and the best knowledge of all. The knowledge I am the body, which is the ego, is a false knowledge of ourself. The true knowledge of ourself is that in which we know that we are the unlimited self, Atman. What is the benefit of thus attaining true self-knowledge? It is only when one knows oneself as self that real good can be done to all creatures on earth. How? Only when self-knowledge dawns will the truth be known that we alone are the reality of all living beings, and only then will the true love towards all blossom in our heart. Until this self-knowledge is obtained, one cannot truly love all creatures merely by taking and propagating on platforms. Love thy neighbor as thyself. It is only when one experiences the whole world and all the souls in it as the first person singular that the real love, a love for not another, Ananya Bhakti, will be achieved. Such self-realization alone is the taproot without which peace, love, and happiness cannot thrive on earth. Therefore, the sole and immediate need of the world is self-inquiry, the medicine that destroys the evil ego. Only a true knower of self, Atma Jnani, can really serve the world perfectly. The mere existence on earth of such a Jnani is sufficient to ensure the spiritual and moral welfare of the whole world. When correctly understood, self-surrender is the surrender of the ego, ahankara, to God. Self-surrender and self-inquiry are in fact one and the same, both in their result, the extinction of the ego, and in their practice. Self-surrender is the path, that of devotion, for those who believe in God. How? Since in fact the individual I and the world are properties belonging to God, to claim the body as I and mine is the great sin of stealing the property of God. If this attachment to the body is surrendered, to be accurate, restored to God, the state of egolessness will be achieved. This state devoid of I and mine is the state of self. Though on superficial observation, there may appear to be a difference between the path of inquiry and the path of devotion, namely, that an aspirant on the path of inquiry attends to self, while an aspirant on the path of devotion attends to God. It will be clear to one who earnestly applies himself to practice that both are the same, not only in the result, namely to be established in self by means of the destruction of the ego, but also in practice. A sincere devotee who wants to surrender himself completely to God should refuse from the very start to continue taking the body as I and mine. If he again thinks I am the body, or this body is mine, he is committing the sin of dadapaharam, that is, taking back what has already been offered to God. Thus, the correct way of practicing self-surrender is for him to be very vigilant that the thought, I am the body, or this body is mine, does not rise in him again. Now, how does he do this? Does he not try to be very watchful within, lest the first person, the feeling, I am the body, should rise again? That is, does he not try always to remain with a sharp attention fixed on the feeling, I? Hence the same self-attention which is going on in an inquirer is also going on in a devotee. Thus it is clear that an attention withdrawn from second and third persons and focused on I is the correct and practical method of surrendering oneself to God. On the other hand, if a devotee seeks God outside himself, it will amount to being a second-person attention. Since God ever shines as the reality of the first person, attending to the first person is the right attention to God, and this is the true path of devotion. The last days of the body of Sri Bhagavan were a clear mirror which showed the greatness of a Jnani. From the day he set foot in Tiruvannamalai, he did not move away even for a minute, but lived there continuously for 54 years. In 1949, a lump began to grow on the lower portion of his left upper arm. Though at first it seemed to be very small, after 2 operations it grew bigger and bigger, bleeding continuously and profusely, and proved to be a sarcoma. All kinds of treatment were tried, including radium application, but in vain. Even after the 4th operation, which was done on the 19th of December, 1949, the disease was not cured. Though this operation was the major one, Sri Bhagavan still refused to be given chloroform. When asked by a devotee whether there was any pain, Sri Bhagavan replied, "Even the pain is not apart from us. Just as the teeth which bite our tongue are not other than us, and just as the thief who beat Sri Bhagavan was not viewed by him as other than himself, so also even the disease which was ravaging his body was net other than he self. So wonder-inspiring was his jnana. Even during the period of great torture caused by the disease, Sri Bhagavan was happily answering his devotees, and his replies were not only instructive but also full of humor, revealing thereby the sublimity of a jnani. Thus he comforted the devotees whenever they were much worried about his health. He once remarked, "The body itself is a disease that has come upon us. If a disease attacks that original disease, is it not good for us?" To another devotee who was lamenting over his illness, he said, "Oh, you are grieving as if your Swami were going away. Where to go? How to go? Going and coming is possible for the body, but how can it be possible for us?" On still another occasion he observed, "Just as the cow does not know whether the garland tied to its horns is still there or has been lost, and just as a drunken man does not know whether his dhoti is on his body or not, so also a jnani does not even know whether his body is still alive or dead." According to the directions of Sri Bhagavan, no one was prevented from seeing him till the very end. After his body had been seated in Padmasanam, every breath went on steadily, and at 8:47 p.m. on Friday the 14th, April 1950, Sri Bhagavan removed his human disguise and shone unveiled in his own nature as the whole, the one infinite space of self, where there is no coming or going. At that moment, devotees on the temple veranda saw a bright light flash and engulf the small room where Sri Bhagavan was seated. But before they were able to conclude that it could have been a powerful photographic flashlight, others who were standing in the open exclaimed, "Jyoti, Jyoti in the sky," for a brilliant meteor had suddenly appeared in the sky. It moved northward towards Arunachalam and vanished behind the summit. Glory to Sri Ramana, the light of Arunachalam. The sacred body of Bhagavan, Sri Ramana, was interred between the hall where he had lived continuously for about 28 years and Sri Matrubhutaswara temple. A Sivalingam was installed on his samadhi and named Sri Ramana Linga Murti. A simple yet majestic temple was erected over it and was consecrated by Kumbhabhishekam on the 18th June 1967. Later, a large auditorium was added to it for conducting celebrations. The shrine of gracious Sannidhi of Sri Arunachala, who by his life exemplified the truth, "I am not this body, I am the ever-existing supreme thing," is ever quenching the thirst of the world for jnana, with the nectar of grace flowing in the form of silence.